top requested amenities, average price per square foot is continued to rise again, which you got to keep in mind. I mean, you're mixing so much stuff in that number, right? You're mixing East Texas, South Texas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio, DFW. So that's a very wide range of flex that's in there. You know, Houston is like becoming like a metal mecca hub of Texas where a lot of new construction is being done.
We are talking about Texas stats.
Texas only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry you guys are out of town or out of state. We'll get to you
Sucks
next
to be
episode.
You. Yeah.
Welcome, Cody.
Welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's good. Still working on the studio, but it's getting good. It's looking better.
That's right. That's right. You know, we for your listeners, we've moved offices and we're at a temporary spot right now while we're building a cool headquarters over here in the south side of Fort Worth. And so Cody was kind enough to let us temporarily set up here all this equipment.
At the back of what looks like a old flex facility, as a matter of fact.
It does.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
Yeah.
So long we've fixed this light issue behind us, which we will. But other than that, it's so cool to be here with this old brick, this old facade, these old windows. I mean, it's just...
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if you know, this place is like 100 years old.
I don't
It's
doubt
old,
it.
yeah.
It's incredible what they've done here and how they've repurposed this warehouse.
Yeah, no, Frank Kent that owns it, you know, he owns all those Cadillac dealerships and whatnot.
That's right.
He's the owner of it, and they've done a good job, you know, but yeah, nothing beats old sturdy warehouses, man. They're kind of my favorite, you know. They got the rafters, unfortunately, that, you know, come low as compared to new age construction, just because things were built a little bit differently back then, but I like it. You can customize it. You can make it look good, you know. I like the older school retro look.
This is actually the perfect building for us one day maybe to do a tour to show some of our developers what you can do with pre-existing buildings. I know this is not industrial necessarily use, but it sort of is.
Yeah, and there's other parks. There's other buildings out here that are older that people have shoved, you know, little garage doors on and have made them a little bit more versatile than kind of what they were previously. You know, older buildings, ceiling height. I mean, you know, even if you've got, you know, here, I mean, you really got 18 feet, but when you get to the rafter, I mean, you're really sitting at probably 12.
Yeah,
you know, it's 12 or 13. So, you know, you do have those restrictions. But no, there's a lot of good repurposing. I was actually talking to a group Monday or Tuesday. My days are kind of all jumbled together nowadays, but they buy buildings to kind of convert to industrial warehouse. The biggest issue that they run into that is, you know, with anything like this is kind of setting up the parking and truck entry and things of that nature. And so, you know, it's a little more strategic, but yeah, no, good to be here. Glad to be rock and rolling again. I think we got some good subject stuff for today that a couple people actually reached out and said, hey, we want to know more about these build-to-suits and whatnot. So we got a little bit of that. And I know we got some Texas Flex stats that me and the guys just put out the other day. As well, but yeah, ready to rock and roll.
I saw that. Let's just go right into those stats. Give the people what they want.
So, you know, a few things that I'll say is, you know, top requested amenities, those things kind of change as new construction gets built. You know, average price per square foot has continued to rise again, quarter over quarter, really over the past, 6-7 years. So you really haven't seen any reluctancy or any downward trend on that. It's now sitting at about 146 across Texas, which you got to keep in mind. I mean, you're mixing so much stuff in that number, right? You're mixing East Texas, South Texas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio, DFW. So that's a very wide range of flex that's in there.
Right.
And so,
and just to be clear, we are talking about Texas stats.
Texas only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry you guys are out of town or out of state. We'll get to you next episode.
Yeah. No, we always have national stats as well, but
Yeah.
because we're based in Texas and we live in Texas, we really like to hone in on that. And that's where a lot of new construction's going, you know.
It is.
A lot of people,
Certainly.
locals, national people. I mean, you got a lot of folks that are coming in and building it. And so another thing to keep in mind, average rental rate, that's gone up again as well. It's now at $14.60 sitting on average. But like I said, each area is a little bit different because, I mean, you got parts of like East Texas that's still sitting in the gross figures of like, $8-9, so that really drags it down. But then you got parts of Austin, some other areas that are seeing low 20s, and so I mean that's a pretty wide range of number. In 2024, roughly 152 buildings were built. That's not parks, that's buildings, right? Some parks, as you know, have 3, 4, 5 buildings in it, and so that's a number that has grown year over year as well. But, your top requested amenities by tenants are still, have changed a little bit. We got storage side yards, visibility frontage, right? Everybody loves that visibility and that frontage,
Man,
especially if you're doing showroom retail style. Those guys want it. They love it. Parking has moved up a few notches because I think we talk about it all the time. People build these things with no parking.
That's right.
We were looking at a park the other day and asked the people, I said, where's the parking at? And they're like, I don't know, tenants will figure it out. And it was in the ETJ, so they're not required to have parking. And I said, well, you may want to get some parking in there.
Yeah.
And then 100% HVAC or climate controlled. And I'm sure that's because of the winter we had and the summer we have. And then higher ceiling, security, concrete driveway, mezzanine space, those kind of drift in later on the thing. But yeah, depending on your park, depending on your area, those things are key drivers to look at. One stat that I will say, so the average flex occupancy is showing 90%. Now that's kind of a loaded number, and I say that because when a new park comes online, like say you just got done building a park and it's now available for lease, a lot of times it's 0% leased, right? Because flex is built to spec traditionally, mostly, right? It's built and then the tenants come. And so whenever when buildings come online and they have 0% occupancy and you're taking that average across all this other stuff, it brings it down. But the lease up timeline is still very, very good across Texas. And so I would say when you take out the spec stuff and you actually look at the average, you're really probably sitting around 95. But that's just because of, there's a lot of good new construction. I mean, Houston is Houston is like kind of like a metal mecca hub of Texas where a lot of new construction is being done. A lot of it's very similar to each other, right? Your basic walk-in door, R-panel, 12, 14-foot garage door, 16, 18-foot ceiling high. It's a lot of very similar stuff out there in Houston, so it's getting very competitive. And there's a lot of key groups out there that build out there. So you got, Tomball, Cody, Conroe, all those areas that are just seeing massive growth and flex. And as you know, Houston's a little different than DFW because Houston has, in DFW, what a lot of people don't realize is, I mean, how many sub-cities are there? Like 40 or 50? I mean, they're like,
right.
You drive from Dallas to Fort Worth and you pass through, 5, 6 cities in the blink of an eye. Houston's just Houston, and so their zoning restrictions, things like that are significantly different than ours out here because out here, a lot of our little independent cities, right? You go through Fort Worth, you go to Bedford, Euless, Hurst. I mean, they'll have their own little codes and little things that they have that are a little bit different than everyone else, right? You build buildings on, on the Dallas side, and maybe your sprinkler requirements, 8, 9, 10,000 feet. You go up to North Fort Worth near Denton, and they're like, oh, you got to be under 6,000 feet. And so each one's a little bit different. So understanding those codes and things are obviously a little bit different. Key purchase criteria for buyers. These are always key for anybody looking to sell. Location is number one. That's the first thing they look at. Then, which is almost a tie, is building class and financing, just because financing is still not the most friendliest, but building class has continued to rise and I'll tell you what that means. So you got your efficient model, right? Your basic build. You start to get a little more higher end, you start to get the showroom, the premium models, the stuff that you like to work on. When you start sliding up that scale, the buyer pool is really looking at the higher end stuff more now than they ever have, right? Before it was just, it was great asset class, this and that, it still is, but they're really focusing on that higher end stuff because they're seeing that stuff is, has a more diverse, resilient tenant pool. It gets higher rents. It's got a lot more positives to it. It's a little bit harder to replicate. You don't get as much of it coming in. Not as many people are building that kind of stuff. So it's a kind of a better quality flex that a lot of people like, right? Just like take the office sector, for example, right? When inflation hit, COVID hit, a lot of people they called it the flight to quality, right? They were kind of going to the higher grade asset class because the inflation had caused a lot of issues with re-tenanting out spaces in these Class B buildings, and it just didn't make sense. When you're refinishing out a space, you're paying the commission, you got the long on-time market. And so it's very similar to this, right? A lot of investors are loving the higher quality stuff. And that's what we love. That's our favorite stuff to sell. I'll tell you, and our lease guys that are sitting out there, I mean, it's their favorite stuff to lease. If they get a good showroom quality build, they're not just dealing with this one tenant pool over here, this your contractor style business, right? Your plumbers, landscapers, electricians. When you get the other stuff, you're dealing with, higher end fitness studios, certain training facilities, maybe design companies and things like that. These guys usually pay more rent. Our lease guys obviously get paid on how much the lease consideration is. So the more rent they get paid, the higher quality of tenant. And also when you start getting up there, you start getting into a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times better, credit worthiness as well.
Right.
And so those tenants can be a little stickier, which is what people like. Your renewal probability is much higher too.
Right.
So that's one thing to keep in mind. But that's your Texas Flex Industrial quick snapshot update.
I love it. So essentially, we have a vacancy rate of maybe 5%.
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly 5%.
In my opinion, yeah.
That is so strong. Like,
it's very good.
yeah, it's very good. I mean, essentially, you build it,
they will come.
They will come. You've got a 95% chance to fill your building. That's amazing. What other asset class currently in this market, in this economy, can boast of those kind of numbers?
I feel like, and obviously it's market driven, but as far as occupancy goes, it seems like multifamily is still doing good on occupancy, but where they struggle is with taxes, insurance, and all this other stuff that increases that you can't pass through to the tenants, right?
Right.
And you can only raise rents so much, and inflation to refinish out spaces has become very expensive to them. And so, but as far as occupancy goes, as far as I know, those still do pretty well on that, even though they are struggling because of the other factors, right? Self-storage traditionally has done pretty good, but we were at that self-storage expo, and I mean, they kind of, a lot of people talked about pretty big slowdown on the storage side as well, just because of the amount of construction and things of that nature, and they look at a little bit different stats than the flex guys and retail guys. But no, I think when you look at all the asset classes, even medical office, general office, retail, with such a good occupancy rate, and you're hedging against inflation better than most commercial real estate asset classes, except storage, right? All you do is sweep the room out, and you're kind of done. I think Flex offers the best benefits in moving forward in commercial real estate. I see it for a long time. I mean, it's got a very good trajectory. It continues to do better and better, and with more tenants coming to it, all it's doing is helping fuel it.
That's right. And I think we talk to a lot of developers. Yeah, of course, you talk to a whole lot more than I do, but I talk to several as well. And certainly what is happening in this asset class, it is getting a little bit more sophisticated. Yep. And I think it behooves a lot of developers to really pay attention, know where you're building these buildings, have a purpose, be intentional, because there is still this sector of developers that are just popping up these metal buildings wherever they can. And I think that those guys need to be very careful, because as developers coming in, they're being more calculated, right? And they're being more sophisticated about their site selections, the type of buildings. Maybe they are a little bit more aware of parking for a retail user. All those things are really important, because if you're just flopping up a building, guys that are a little bit more sophisticated and more thoughtful are going to take your tenants. Right. And so it's you need to know your market. I think putting up metal buildings outside the county is still a great business idea. You just need to know where your competition is, where they're located, and make sure that you're not competing with a guy that has a whole lot more to offer. Right. Yeah. As far as amenities, quality, parking, all those things, because guys like that are coming in, and I'm one of them.
Yeah, no. And, I knew a guy that said it best. He kind of talked about, competition in a different way. He said, he always wanted a jet, an airplane. And he said he finally got one. And then when he went out to the airport or the runway or whatever to look at it, it was the smallest jet in a row of jets. And so then he actually felt quite small at that point. But as far as the competition goes, I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, it can be very competitive. And so anytime you're doing anything, you always want to figure out, okay, where's the competition at? Understand your competition. But also, even if there's not any, how do I insulate myself for when that does come in?
That's right, because it's coming. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's every asset class, though. It's not just this. I mean, it's every commercial real estate asset class.
And we talked about this, too, where I would mention a certain part of town, and I would bring you a deal. Hey, what do you think about this piece of dirt? And you're like, well, you might want to be careful, because so-and-so is here, and they're building them like crazy. They're leasing them at this much a square foot. Can you compete with that? And usually the answer is, nope. Let me go elsewhere. And that's fine. That's good for him. Good for me, right? Because we have total different clientele that we're trying to reach. And luckily, I'm not trying to compete with efficiency builds. So,
well, and so that's why I always say, if you're looking at something and there is efficiency builds out there, and maybe it's an owner that, is building them all cash and doesn't have to get the return that you or I or any other investor has to get. If you're going to build something out there, it's fine. There's people that do that. Make sure you build a superior product that's like, hey, tenant comes in, they're like, oh, well, this guy's this down the street. Well, then that's where you need to go. Because that's not what we're looking for here, And so those are all things to keep in mind.
Speaking of the retail. So you're saying you're seeing a lot more retail users starting to use light industrial?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not like your TJ Maxx's and stuff.
Right.
You know, those guys are going to stay where they're at. Their stores aren't. You know, my wife goes there all the time, and if they went into a little flex space, she'd lose her mind. It's just too small. You know.
Yeah.
But your smaller base users, right?
Okay.
You know, your people like your little fitness studios, your gyms. You know.
Okay.
You know, little athletic centers, things like that are in there. You know, maybe certain delis, commercial kitchens, things that tenants like that.
Mm-hmm.
They are seeing a huge benefit in coming into these, right? A lot of times the rates are cheaper, you know. A lot of them aren't they're not getting as much business through frontage that sometimes that retail offers that you're paying for, you know. And so with technology changing so much nowadays, there was a high-end bakery that was in a park that we sold, and I was in there talking to them, and they came from a retail center, and they're like, yeah, you know, we don't really rely on drive-by traffic. Our social media presence is so good. Our word of mouth is so good. So we came here, and the rate's like almost half, and they got more space.
Mm-hmm.
And because their business is growing, it was like perfect for them.
Right.
And so tenants like that thrive very well in these small bay parks.
Yeah, like last mile e-commerce.
Oh, yeah.
Those kind of retailers are amazing because, they want maybe a little showroom to showcase some of the things the products they have, but really they rely on internet sales, and so they want the warehouse portion primarily. But with that storefront, they can bring in customers to show their products, to even purchase them on site. But in that case, though, you need to provide them enough parking.
Yeah.
So I think it certainly behooves developers to be thoughtful that if part of your business strategy is not to have just the blue collar type service industries like a plumber, electrician, but you are trying to draw some of the retail people, then you need to provide that parking. You just can't have the attitude, well, they'll figure it out, because you'll just have a beautiful storefront look, but you're not going to draw the right tenant. So,
well, and then, if you're dealing with that official bill, like you said, I mean, your plumbers, electricians, they're not there a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
The only tenants on that contractor base side that are usually there are like the machine shop people and whatnot that are actually manufacturing or crafting something in their facility. And so, when you got a park that's got, that landscaper, these guys, this, that, if they're not there clogging up the parking, then you'll see that. But as soon as you start getting like cabinetry guys and whatnot that are actually building stuff in there, that's when that parking, starts to get clogged. And so that's why we always say, at least 3 per 1,000. That's a number that we like a lot. But yeah, no, it's funny to see them. And I've been baffled by this whole e-commerce thing and how it's really ramped up huge through, small bay, flex space. And it seems like every park we work on now has a little e-commerce guy and whatnot. And me and one of the guys were at a park not long ago, and this guy pulls up in a really nice Porsche, and we were out there talking. I said, hey, nice car, blah, blah, blah. I said, what do you do? And he goes, I have an e-commerce business, and I sell adult diapers. And
wow.
And I'm like, that got you that car. All right. Like, that's very interesting. I was kind of shocked. But I mean, his business was thriving and doing very, very well. And he opened the garage door, and we were looking around in there, and I was like, yeah, it's a lot of adult diapers in here. And
did you try
like,
any?
No, I didn't try. No.
Be the right fit for you?
No, I felt like he's going to charge me for it if I did. He seemed like that kind of guy, but
wouldn't let you return it. Huh?
Yeah. But it's a business that is thriving like in all over the place and seems to really have no end. And so it's just shocking that it's something we never saw before, but now almost every park we sell, it seems like, oh yeah, this guy's an e-commerce guy. This guy does, this kind of shipping or this or that.
So
and they love the higher ceilings. Those guys are huge on higher ceilings.
They can stack.
They're not going into 14, 16-foot places,
So Cody, this is a great segue because I was having a conversation with another developer out of state, and we were talking about kind of the retail side of how the beauty of light industrial, specifically if you build it right, you can cater to a really broad sector of asset like businesses rather. And so that being said, though, when you're building these buildings, is there a primary tenant that you should focus on that like essentially we know that blue collar services primarily probably are going to be our foremost, like our tenants right off the bat. But how do you prepare for like to start the retail? How do you like approach that? What type of retailers? You know, we mentioned gyms, but how do you, I guess, put that in part of your due diligence process of the type of tenants you're going to be able to reach?
You know, a lot of that's going to come
I
down.
hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
You see where I'm trying
I
to go
think
with that?
is it are you trying to say like how do we know if we can get this tenant here, or how are we tailoring the building and the project to getting that higher end guy? So a lot of that's going to depend on the area, right? The area is going to be very, very key. If you're out there in the rural area, you know, stuff like that, I mean, a lot of times that stuff just doesn't work, right? Because you don't want to put all that money in there and not get it out. It works in areas that, you know, have good household incomes, you know, good traffic counts, good spending per capita, where that money's, you know, being shelled out there. You know, in Texas, if you're over, you know, $11,500, $12,000, I mean, that's a great number. That means people are at Chili's on Tuesday, you know, at the movie theater, like, you know, they're spending money out there. Yeah. So those are things to kind of look at, and that'll kind of tell you, okay, we got good spending out here, we got good traffic counts, we got good earners. Maybe we can get some of these higher end guys, right? And maybe we can get, you know, a basketball training facility. Maybe we can get a pickleball court. Maybe we can get a, you know, a really nice, you know, fitness studio, yoga. Those are the key things that you look at, right? And how diverse that area is. I don't know if anybody heard that, but yeah, that's where
sounds like a great little motorbike right there.
Yeah, that's just the warehouse.
That's another tenant type right there.
Yeah,
it's a small engine repair company.
Yeah, out there flooring someone else's car. Yeah.
I mean, that's really good because I think too, you know, when we started doing some pre-marketing exercises for a couple of locations, it drew just a wide range of tenant base, right? But I think, too, it's part of our job to educate people that, hey, our building is perfect for you, right? Whether you're a clothing company, whether you're a smoke shop.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
They're in every park now, it seems like. But, you know, you're like, hey, why are we good for you? Hey, our ceilings are high. We've got great glass frontage, you know, great storefront. We're allowing you to do this. We're allowing you to put a nice neon sign up front. We've got a beautiful monument sign out here for you as well. You know, this place is very professional. We keep everybody in line. We don't have just wild signage and wild vinyls on windows. Like, you know, this is a good professional park that's going to have, you know, really good, you know, flow with other tenants and things of that nature. So, yeah, if you're doing a higher end park, understanding those things, which I think is, you know, what y'all have got a good grasp on, especially on your Midlothian concept. I mean, that's something that, you know, really shows, hey, we've got good quality spaces, bringing a lot of light. You've got, you know, a good showroom retail look from the outside, good accessibility. You got, you know, good ability to put a nice, beautiful sign up here that stays within restrictions probably. You know, we got a nice monument. So those things are going to tailor to that kind of tenant.
And great parking. We have great parking there too.
Parking's key.
So I think if anything in this conversation that developers, I think, should really pay attention to is be intentional, be a little bit more sophisticated, and you're going to draw an amazing tenant pool of people, you know?
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to educate people too on what your building can cater to. And I think that's something we want to work on as well. As like, as we're branding flexspacewarehouses.com, by the way, is what type of marketing are we putting out there to educate our potential tenants that our space is perfect? So it's a really exciting time in light industrial, and it's a little bit the Wild West out there. But I think as some great groups get started and they start building things that are good examples, I think this will all kind of balance out and work out. And then we're going to be clear of the different types of light industrial buildings you can do, right? Efficiency.
And it'll keep evolving too.
What's the middle? So we know there's Class A. There's, I guess we just give it the B and the C kind of classifications. And
yeah, I mean, you know, you got your real crappy stuff where it's like rock and gravel driveway,
right,
and you know, things like that. So I mean, you know, that's the lowest of low end. That's the stuff that, you know, you're spending $26 a foot on the metal building itself, and you're getting the land for next to nothing, and you're just bringing in some of that, I think it's actually called flex-based gravel, where it's got that gravel and sand in it.
Yes.
Put that down, you fix the pothole every rain, and you just operate it.
But traditionally, people have not put kind of the classes in light industrial, but I think it's now time. So developers, please, please grade your development. Because I've had some developers come to me and say, hey, we're doing this nice metal building. We're putting a window and door. And I see the renderings or I see the problem. I'm like, yeah, that's efficiency. I know you think it's nice because it's brand new, but it's not like sophisticated. It's not a Class A that's going to bring a premier tenant type, So I please start grading your developments. So
we see that too.
It's going to help us all.
We see that too. People are like, oh yeah, and it's going to have great windows, this, that, and it's like, that's a 3x3 Home Depot window you put next to the door.
A little vinyl window, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not sure if that's showroom, but we'll let it slide.
Right. Yeah. Someone has to literally poke their head out up to the window to see anything.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So you mentioned we want to talk about build-to-suit.
Yeah. So build-to-suit is something that a lot of people are interested in. They, want to know the pros and cons. How do you do it? What to look out for, how to make it. Something that is a good deal for not just the tenant but obviously the landlord as well. And so obviously what a build to suit is a tenant comes to you, or you go get a tenant and they want something very specific, right? They're like, I want a 5,000 square foot building with this, and this in it. So now you're customizing a product for that specific person. And you always do the lease first, right? We've actually seen people not do the lease first. You always do the lease first, and you hammer out the details of what you're doing in that lease, right? So say you come to me and you've got a window business, and you're like, all right, Cody, I need 5,000 square feet. I need a mezzanine space. I need 4 offices. I need 3 restrooms and a conference room, and blah, 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 and this and that. It's like, okay, so now as the developer, I'm going to go figure out what that cost is. And then once I have that, then I can come up with a rental rate for you to lease that space. And traditionally, build-to-suits are longer than 3 years, right? Those guys are at least usually doing 5 years. If you're doing a larger site, larger industrial build-to-suits, those things can be 10, 15, 20 years. But as far as for small bay flex, they're usually at least 5. And so you want to make sure that you got your cost outlined, that everybody's on the same page of what's being built. Timing is key, right? Because they're running a business. They have to have it done in time. You got to make sure that you can get it completed in time. So understanding that is very good, because there are a lot of small users that have very specific needs for inside of a space, right? Especially if they have specific machinery or any type of equipment or something of that nature, maybe need more doors or cross doors or, whatever that is. There's a lot of tenants out there, and so there's actually a lot of money to be made in build-to-suits. There's a couple companies that do it really, really well. I know that's something that y'all are working on as well, but there's a growing demand for very niche users, and those guys are not to be slept on. But also, when you're doing it, and if you're doing it inside of your park, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, even though you're customizing it to them, you don't want to over-customize it to where nobody else wants it.
That's right.
And we've ran into that many times where
unless the tenant is going to pay you for it directly, right?
Yeah. And maybe if they're required to bring it back to whatever.
That's right.
But you don't see that very often.
Mm-hmm.
But we see it all the time where you get a space and you're like, man, this is a one-tenant space. Like maybe there was like a little bio lab or something in there or whatever, and maybe they shaped the concrete up a little bit differently to have, different levels or something. There's a lot of things that we've seen that we're like, man, this was a very specific tenant. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a lot of money to go backwards on this thing. And so anytime you're doing a build-to-suit in a park, we always say, make sure you're doing it, but within reason, to where you can also go, okay, hey, if and when they leave, this is releasable without a huge cost coming into it, because you got to also put that into your numbers as well, whether you're holding it or not. Because if you're holding it for a tenant you highly customized, you need to know what that would cost to bring that space back to normal to release as well, and keep that factor in your mind also. So there's a lot of little things to look out for, right? Don't over customize. You plan for long-term strategy, whether it's exit or hold. Tenant creditworthiness is a little more key in build to suit, right? You don't want me coming up, starting my e-commerce business in your build to suit. I've never done it before. My mom's going to co-sign for me. You don't want that.
Right.
So
financials.
You want some good, strong
History,
financials. You want to know, where they've been, where they are, where the money's coming from. How can they pay this rent over time? Usually, you're getting a higher deposit out of them and things of that nature. Always lock in the lease before you break ground. A couple things to consider: your upfront costs are traditionally going to be higher than just your shell spaces. Design timelines and things like that are the things that we see people running into most. Is you get a tenant that wants something and they're like, okay, we have to be in by this time. If you've never done it before, you're going to, you got time to sit down with the tenant, figure out the design. You're now getting bids and this and that. So managing the timeline is the biggest thing that we see that are hurdles for owners and the tenants, right? People love not managing timelines. I got a house being done right now. It was supposed to be done 2 months ago. All right, that timeline's gone. Yeah. Like it's gone. And every day I talk to the contractor. Oh, you should be moving in tonight. And it's like, well, there's no sinks or kitchens, so I don't see that in. But managing the timeline is very key. But a lot of times build-to-suits bring higher rental rates, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Lenders love build-to-suits. So if you're building a park and you already have a tenant that maybe is going to take 10,000 feet, something like that, and you're going to the lender, they love that. That's a huge benefit. And so those are things to kind of keep in mind on the build-to-suit for anybody that is looking to do that.
That's wonderful. I've got a question about that. So when we're talking about this scenario, are we saying, hey, build out the shell, build out the exterior of the building, and then you're trying to draw that build-to-suit tenant after that? Or are you trying to do that even before you build the building?
You can do it that way. The best way to do it is you got the parcel, and it's like, hey, I can fit a building this size here. We'll try to find a build-to-suit tenant that we can build within that range, and then you go from there.
And if you have, let's just say you have a 2 to 5 acre site, you can do multiple buildings.
There's a lot of people that do that too. Actually, not as many as there should be because there's a huge need for it, but there's several people. You and I visited a site out there up north, and they had, I think that was it was like 8 acres there or 10 acres, and they did like an acre and a half parcels with buildings that some were 2-story, some were 1-story, but that's all they did there. And they had the parcel, so they know, okay, we can build a building up to this size.
That's right.
So you can go as high or as low on that.
So
they did that. Some people do that as a sale and not a lease too.
That's right. And I think that goes back to our point of being more intentional, being a little bit more sophisticated, because that takes some planning, right? So if you have a 5 acre site, you might need to plat it in a way that you can have different buildings on different parcels of your large lot, right? That you've now platted to have multiple sites that you can potentially even sell off or condo. So that when you're doing a built-to-suit, if you want to turn around in the future and sell that to that particular, what was a tenant, but now, wants to be a property owner, that business wants to own their building, you can do that. So I think it really is important that if you're a developer, think about those things beforehand. So for example, and this comes, actually, I guess this is a personal example, Midlothian, for example, that is just one entire park, right? One parcel is platted as one development. Well, we got a call from some folks, and their interest was, hey, would you sell us 1 or 2 of these buildings?
Happens all the time.
And so, we declined and said, no, we're just going to build the whole entire park as one. However, it's an interesting idea, and it certainly would help with funding and just getting things going right off the bat. It just helps a developer if you can kind of sell 1 or 2 of these buildings, right? But we would have to go back and replat those buildings so that we can sell off those single buildings. So I just think that, in the future, I probably would plat it in a way where each building has its own boundaries, and it's already platted in a way that I could sell them individually or sell them as a park. So I think that's something that we're going to probably look into in the future of, let's go plat it in a way where we can sell off each building if we needed to.
And there's private investors out there that I know that actually do that, and they do it in a way on the investment side. So they'll buy an existing park that's leased, and they'll replat the buildings to sell them. Or they will condo the spaces to sell them to the tenants that are already there. And so, there's definitely people out there that do that on the reverse side, kind of what you're talking about.
Right.
But no, I think having that aspect is very good to have, because there's a lot of users out there that need specific stuff that can't go buy a building, you know, or for whatever reason. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely something that, you know, you should look into. And, you know, you go to them, you have models, right? You almost become like a home builder where it's like, hey, we got all these different models. We can customize this, we can customize that. And, you know, kind of having those things for, you know, people to kind of choose and whatnot. Obviously, you don't want to go too crazy. If it's within one of your parks, you don't need an orange building with the rest of them being white.
Right.
But you know, that is something that, you know, you'll have to put your custom developer hat on.
That's right. Yeah, we're working on one right now, which has been fantastic, and it's kind of opened our eyes to say, hey, we want to do more of these. You know, we're looking at a 10-year lease with, you know, 3% increases every year.
Yeah.
And the site is very retail oriented, so it works out perfectly. So I think built to suit is certainly something that developers should pay attention to, but go into it with that frame of mind. You already have a plan, you know, you're planning it in a way where it works out. So yeah, that's amazing.
Well, and one thing I'll add on to, because it was a question, I actually wrote it down, as somebody said, you know, how do I find a build to suit tenant? Like, how do I find one? Right? A lot of those can come from your marketing or pre-marketing, things of that nature. Brokers are a great way to have it, right? Because, like, I know our guys here every now and then, they'll get a request from out of state or somewhere else that, you know, hey, this tenant needs, you know, 10,000 square feet. They need it very specific. They need, you know, all these things. And so now they're trying to find sites that, you know, work for those guys, or they, you know, have to go to a developer that can maybe build it. So, you know, obviously your marketing, brokers are key. Also, another one that's key is the, you know, local government, chamber of commerce, economic development. People underestimate those guys. I was at ICSC, and we ran into, we were working on a project out in Seguin, Texas, and people from Seguin were there, the economic development, and I was talking to him and telling him what we were trying to do out there on a small bay side. And he's like, man, yeah, we're getting calls from people all the time. They're looking to come out here. You know, we've got certain incentives, blah, blah, blah. And so I just started poking and prodding, and like, hey, man, you know, let us know who's looking. Like, who's looking? Let us call them, you know. And there's a lot of, you know, getting in with the city is, I know a lot of people hate the city and hate dealing with them because, you know, all the red tape, and, you know, when you're building with them, it can be, but those guys can be just a great book of business at the same time. They helped fill up a park out near Kilgore just by people calling into the city out there. Like do not sleep on, you know, being friendly with those guys, because, you know, I probably can't do it in Weatherford anymore because I've gotten so mad at those guys so many times. But I know that they've got several people out there that we could probably get, but they've just been so difficult that I just can't swallow my pride. But
that's hilarious, because I was in a conference call where somebody else mentioned that about that city.
Oh God,
that's quite interesting. They have maybe a reputation that they want to maybe adjust.
Well, you know. Well, and it started years and years ago with me. We tried to build a storage facility out there on a piece of land over on Rook Williams, and went to them, and they're going, no, we'd never allow that there. And I tried. They said no. I said, all right, whatever. Well, about a year later, a storage facility got built there by someone else, and so that, you know, obviously, you know, is now in my mind every time I go talk to them.
Part of the club.
I know, and so
you didn't pay the right people, apparently.
Apparently not. And then, you know, they had ideas for another piece of land that me and Tran were actually trying to do a park on, and they're like, no, we'd rather have a horse boarding facility there or whatnot. And it's like, all right, well, you know, your wish is your command. So, but cities do hold a lot of good intel, and especially if they offer incentives for businesses. And that's why they have those people that are calling, because they offer certain incentives. And so whether it's relocating, adding a certain number of employees, or anything of that nature, businesses can receive incentives from cities. And so understanding that as well will help you out in your build-to-suit journey.
Well, Cody, you have dropped some tremendous nuggets today.
We still need our nugget button.
Yeah, I know. We're going to get one. I hope you guys are enjoying it. By the way, we hear from people weekly. I know Cody shares that with me every now and then. I share with him that, you know, I got a text message or an email or LinkedIn. And if you're listening, if you're enjoying the information we're putting out, can you do us a favor? And that is, first, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, follow us on LinkedIn, and just share this information. We want to get this out to as many people as possible. And our main goal is just to create and foster a community of developers, of investors. If you're interested in ever investing in a project that we're doing, please sign up at investinflexspace.com. Obviously, if you need to know who the top broker is, I mean, is that not obvious by now? You need to be calling Cody Payne with Callers International. But we really enjoy everybody in the community, and we're also looking forward to hosting some events pretty soon at our office.
Yeah,
I know me and you talked about. I know you guys have done something with Colliers, but certainly we want to do some joint stuff too.
We're working on a few more, and as soon as I have those dates, we'll announce them. I know we're going to do our Christmas one like we did last year that you came to out there in Dallas, but we're trying to do one right before the midsummer that will also bring together a lot of developers, investors, and things of that nature, and also people to come pitch certain deals that maybe they're working on that they need money for.
Yeah.
So as soon as I have that date, I'll let you know, and then obviously we're always going to events as well.
Yes, and two, we're going to be interviewing a couple developers here in the next couple episodes.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at, some FlexSpace developers,
good success stories, and
garage developers, luxury storage developers. We're going to bring on some people here and share their stories, and you always learn something. You always learn something.
Yeah. I've enjoyed it. It's been great. We've had good folks reach out, and so want to continue to build a good community. The Flex guys, I think I've told you this before. The people that are getting involved in like Small Bay Flex One, they're like the best open community, friendly community as ever, right?
Yes.
You go to a multifamily event and you're like, hey, what are you working on? They're like, get the hell away from me.
That's
this
right.
is my deal. I found this one. This is off market, But the Flex guys are just so much more friendlier. That's why I've always enjoyed it. And storage guys, they're pretty open too. But Flex is, the community is just such a better community in my opinion of entrepreneurs and people that are just open and willing to talk and learn and listen. And hey, how do we work together? How do we do something? And
yeah, I love that.
That's why I enjoy it.
We're just a bunch of regular dudes, man. Just got some tennis shoes on or boots or whatever it may be. Yeah. No suits here. Nothing wrong with suits, but.
I wore a suit every day until COVID.
Until COVID, yeah.
Yeah.
And now look at you.
It wouldn't fit anymore
nice
anyway.
Polo shirt.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you. Looking forward to the next episode.
All right.
Thank you,
see
brother.
you then.